Welcome to The Connecting Place with Andrea Fabry, making the connection between health and your environment. Now, here's your host, Andrea Fabry.
Today's program is very specific to those who have experienced or are experiencing a toxic mold contamination in a home environment. The question then arises, what about my possessions? Sometimes I've seen this question does not arise. There is no knowledge that potentially you can bring a mold problem with you into your new environment. And this alone is a reason to do this broadcast. It's true that you can bring a mold problem with you via your possessions. Now the question always comes up then, does that mean I have to throw everything out? Well, there's no one simple answer to this. And joining me today for this program is my husband, Chris. Thank you for being here.
Because we have been through this together, this stuff thing. I remember when you called, we talked about that airplane ride that I had. You called when I was in Chicago and you said, I think we need to leave the house. And one of my first thoughts was, well, wait a minute, what about the stuff that we've accumulated? It's there's an emotional connection that I had, especially with my books and with the pictures and with all that kind of thing with the kids and the memories, the memorabilia. So this is, this hits right at the heart.
It does. And we were advised at that time to treat the home like a fire. That was absolutely the best advice possible. Now, we had remediated the home 2 times. We had replaced a lot of things, a lot of appliances, carpeting, bedding. I had treasured pieces of furniture. We just replaced our couch. I loved that couch.
Yes.
Wait
a minute. You know how many times Andrea went to the furniture store to see if this would fit and, get the right color and everything, and then you put it in there and then we leave.
We left.
And the kitchen table. Remember the kitchen table.
Love the kitchen table.
We can talk about that. Does wood hold mold like everything else does? And I think the one thing that we thought was, after what we've been through, we don't want to take any chances here with this that could be cleaned or couldn't be cleaned. That's where we were after the 2 remediations. So continue. But the point that I'm making is that it is a really difficult thing to decide.
It is. And not every situation is the same. But I want to talk about the logistics of this decision and favor the caution over the practicality, if you will, because it's very easy to get caught up in specific items. And I will honestly say, I think we could have brought some of our things with us. I don't look back and go, we had to treat it like a fire. But the reason that was the best advice is it helped us move forward, as opposed to getting caught and trapped in an item-by-item thing. Now, there are certain principles of cross-contamination that are true. Ceramics and dishes and glass items, much easier to clean than complicated fans in computer items and appliances, or porous items in books and bedding and clothing. These things are true. Some can be cleaned. And if the situation is isolated, contained, maybe not as severe, you can certainly clean things and bring them. But let's just talk generally. Let's assume it's a serious situation and you're just beginning to contemplate, what do I bring? This is my suggestion always. Think store. Think of storing your items. Don't necessarily jump to, we have to throw everything away. That is too big of a jump. Now, for us, in our situation, it was serious enough, and even though we had remediated twice, we were so sickened by that home. It wasn't, to me, it was the easier thing to do, to leave it all. Do you feel that way?
It was, and there's no way for us to go back and relive all of that or think all of the ramifications. I know one thing that we avoided, and that was, we brought Grandma's rocking chair, because Grandma's rocking chair meant so much to us. We can't get rid of or even store Grandma's rocking chair. Got to have Grandma's rocking chair. Got to bring that with us. Well, the kids come down with something, constant nosebleeds, or you have a headache. You have to go. And this is what we were doing. We were going, even after we moved out, we were going to the emergency room. We were doing all that stuff. And I shuddered to think what we would have gone through looking at Grandma's rocking chair and thinking, could that chair be doing this? Could it be triggering all the stuff that we're now seeing in this new house? What if we cross-contaminated? You are in such a vulnerable emotional state there that getting to a clean place and being able to move forward, knowing that I don't have to worry about that stuff, cross-contaminating us here, I think that's really important.
Absolutely. And this is the gift I hope this program gives to you if you are contemplating this, or let's say a husband and wife are sitting together listening to this. We both empathize with you. I understand the desire to not be over the top. Let's not be extreme. Oh, come on. That may be for them, but that's not for us. The gift I hope to give you is let's jump ahead to that next environment. Let's think ahead and what that's going to be like. What's true about leaving a toxic mold situation when you have been sensitized to these toxins and you have been made ill and injured by this? You will still be symptomatic for a while after you leave. Now, just what Chris said. Do I want to be thinking as I'm seeing my child with another headache or another abdominal issue, is that because we brought Grandma's rocking chair? Is that because we brought their favorite toy, or we brought this or we brought that? That plays with your mind. And I know it seems over the top, but 10 years from now, it's going to be one blip on the screen. I know that's hard to believe, but that's the truth. Start simple. Go to Walmart, ask family and friends to give you some gift cards, and start with the simplest of items. A simple air mattress. I know those aren't perfect. They have chemicals. I know that, but it's simple. Or a simple cotton futon, whatever is cheap, affordable, a way to sleep, folding chairs, a few outfits that aren't perfect and organic, whatever it takes to start over and be simple. And if it's too much to think about dumping, and I'm not suggesting you do, it can be worth $45, $50 a month to store your items until you can think about it. Now, we left the home as it was for a period of time. We didn't have to think about it right away. The bank gave us a forbearance because we said it wasn't habitable, and at the time they went along with that. I don't think we could prove to the bank that it was not habitable. Is that true?
Well, we had Carl and some others who came along, and then the testing that we did, we could have proved it that way. But it was because we had a lawsuit against the builder and against the remediators who botched the job that they gave us the forbearance. If there was legal action, that's the reason why they said okay. But I want to take you back to my office, because we had constructed an office in the garage, in the third bay of the garage, and this was kind of my oasis. I went in there to write and to do the stuff that I do to keep paying the bills and the creative stuff. And we thought, well, since the office is in another area of the house and there's no HVAC, there's no contamination in there. And we went several months with me working in there when no one was in the other part of the house. And finally we tested it. We found that there was contamination there. And I can take you back to that bookshelf that had a bunch of signed copies. There was one book, a book on writing, that I had kept. It was one of the first books I ever read about fiction that just really spoke to me. And I had it sealed in a plastic bag to keep it safe, because it was published in 1981. And it was a really expensive book. You got it for my birthday, I think, one year, Andrea.
I did.
And I looked at all of this, and I looked at that one book, and I thought, you know what? If I take anything, it's going to be that. And I reached for it, and I held back, and I thought, if I take this, what's to keep me from taking the signed Prince of Tides by Pat Conroy? I mean, or what's the To Kill a Mockingbird that I got right there? And I stopped, and I said, no, I'm not gonna bring that with me. I can't do that, because once I say yes to that, then I got to say no to everything else.
That is what I find in talking with so many families over the years. The more you go down this road of specific items, the harder it gets. And there are times when thinking about specific items is just fine. You've got to know what works for you. But sometimes just getting to safe ground, if that's your focus and leaving everything behind, it can be, you can move forward faster than getting pulled back into the item by item. And I just want to emphasize that doesn't mean there aren't some things that can be cleaned and brought along. But the thinking in terms of that immediate crisis, that month-long crisis that exists when you change environments, maybe suddenly, or you've thought about this and it's time to move, the simpler the better. The more you put that on hold, and that's why renting a storage unit can be useful to some. Other people just decide to leave it and dump it, and that has worked. There's no right or wrong way to do this. Now, the question often arises, well, can we have a yard sale? First of all, well, yes, you can, but do you want to continue to be around this stuff? Well, one spouse may say, well, I'm healthy enough. I'm not affected by this. I'll do the yard sale. That may work okay. But you always have to be aware if one person is going to be around the stuff, they risk bringing just even the problem with them on their shoes. And so this issue of cross-contamination can get very specific and kind of ominous. Mm-hmm. And I know it feels over the top, but you have to evaluate all of those things. Now, when Chris was still working in the office, because we didn't think and it didn't turn out to be as bad as the house. It didn't have those high levels of Stachybotrys in his office. He wore a suit.
Tyvek, yeah.
A Tyvek suit. And then just kept that at his workplace. And then when he came home, we didn't have to worry. And he wore covering on your shoes, too. Or you took your shoes off. I don't know. But we didn't have to worry about any of that because of that action. So there are ways to separate the two environments that are very practical and simple. But does it seem like, do we really have to think about all this? Really, in the short term, yes, it's better to think about this. I wish I could tell you how many people I've talked to later who say, nobody told me that. Yeah. And now we're in this new place.
And I wish we hadn't taken this or whatever. But what do you say to, and sometimes it's the wife that will feel this way. Oh, you're just being too sensitive. I find it's usually the husband who says, but wait a minute. We've paid all this money for this washing machine or that couch over there or the sentimental thing that has been handed down from generations. This is way too over the top. What do you say to that spouse who just doesn't believe the other spouse that it's going too far?
I understand. I'm right there with you. You're not crazy to think that. And I even know that your spouse who feels crazy and over the top knows that too. I get it. You don't want to be one of those, people on the internet you see who are just like so hyper about this. But the reality of this is, and this is not the point of this discussion, is to go into the science behind this, but these spores are minute. There's how many thousands that can fit on one postage stamp? We've got the mycotoxins. We've got the non-viable spores that can still do damage, wreak havoc on the immune system when an immune system is sensitized. This is not about the science. This is about understanding where you're coming from, validating that, but knowing that in the long run, so much better to be cautious. That's why storage feels so much more doable at the time. Disposing and dumping and trashing and getting rid of is too extreme. Here's another advantage of storing, and that is when things settle and you get your new clean environment, and you'll notice that your whole lifestyle becomes simpler. I mean, your life will never be the same, and I look back and go, that's the bonus of this. I don't see possessions the same way. I don't want to accumulate. I don't want to put value in things as much as I did. But we still have stuff. I'm amazed how much stuff we continue to have all these years later. But later, when it settles, you can bring something in one at a time. And the good news about sensitivity to this kind of toxicity is the body will let you know. Who's ever highly reactive will know right away. And what we're talking about here is not that they're going to be deathly ill from this. The problem is inflammation. These are inflammatory responses. So small amounts of these toxins to the sensitized person causes inflammation, which just sets back this whole process of recovery. The goal after an inflammatory response, like through toxic mold and living in a contaminated environment where the body is constantly in stress mode, is to calm the system down. When you continue to aggravate it with these types of toxins in these small amounts, it's constant inflammation. So I guess what I'm saying is, just give your spouse as much room as possible on both sides, both persons. And I know that the person who's real sensitive and very nervous and afraid feels badly for this. But if you're together and you've been together for a while, you're going to make it through this. You'll never regret being cautious. Never.
And usually one person, one spouse handles it better than the other for DNA or for whatever reason.
You mean physically?
Physically, yeah. And so that spouse may say, well, if I can go in the house, it's fine. And you're the one who's sensitive, so you stay away. But that spouse has to be really, really careful, because if they're going in and out of the house and rifling through things or going through old letters or the different stuff that you have with paperwork for taxes and those types of things, you can bring that with you to the other spouse, and that can create real problems.
I want to share what happened with us 7 years after we left. Okay, Chris went back into the house and just got our scrapbooks. I was a huge scrapbooker. Huge scrapbooker. And that's so painful to even say. That's what he got. And of course, it's just like a fire. What do you go to? You go to the pictures and movies and that kind of thing. Just exactly what we went back for. And we kept them in our garage for years, locked up in trash bags and Tupperware
containers
bins and taped. So 7 years after, it was time to scan some of this. It's amazing how time will pass, and amazing, too, how much I lived without the scrapbooks. You're moving forward. See, what we get trapped in is, how can I live without this or that? It's amazing how you can live without this or that. And it's amazing how generous people will be, by the way. And I want to come back to asking for help and what to ask for. But I decided I'm going to scan this for my daughter's birthday. So I took one of the scrapbooks, put it in the car, in a bag. But it's 7 years, okay? I'm like, I am not going to be, we're past this. So I took it into the office store and I opened it up, and it was going to be too much. So she said, well, pick your pages. So I paged through it with my bare hands. I didn't think anything of this. And as I got in the car and I left the book there and I got back in, I noticed that my lungs started to burn. It was a very old feeling. I hadn't had it for years. And I'm like, okay, this is totally in my mind. And I was fine with that because it was traumatic. So even if it's a psychosomatic response, I'll give myself that. So I'm kind of having trouble breathing. It's very painful. And it got better. I knew it would get better. I wasn't worried about some long-term setback. But the next day, I broke out in a rash on those very fingers where I paged through the book. Now, that was not psychosomatic. I'm sorry. That's just my body is so sensitized to that. Had not been exposed. It took 7 weeks for that rash to go away. And I was very patient about it. But it was a reminder to me, this is real. And I am so grateful now for the advice to treat it as a fire, even after we had remediated that home twice. And again, I repeat, I'm sure there are some things we could have brought and been okay. But I want to go back to what I just alluded to. When you leave and you ask for help, people are very good and willing to often give you new clothes, or hand-me-downs, I'm sorry, not new clothes. And then that plays with your mind. Well, what if they have mold? Or what if that's contaminated with things? And then what if that gets into my washing machine? And it's probably, fine. But here's my suggestion is to just draw a line the same way you're drawing a line when you leave. We're going to be over the top. Be over the top and say, we'd prefer gift cards. Thank you so much. I'm in a trauma zone right now. I just can't even imagine going through used clothes and worrying about that. So that's just a small suggestion for those who are in this kind of extreme setting and looking to get help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. People are so willing, even if they shake their heads and they don't understand. It's amazing how helpful people can be.
So do you think people are going to make it? If somebody's listening right now and they're in the middle of this and they're trying to figure out how, even where to store this stuff and we don't know where to start, is there hope?
There is hope. There's always hope. Even if you brought things and you're starting at that point and deciding, should I toss this now? Always move forward. Always move forward. Always border on caution when it comes to the reality of toxic mold. But yes, I assure you, there is another side to this.
You've been listening to The Connecting Place, making the connection between health and your environment. Join us again next time for The Connecting Place with Andrea Faber.